Hi guys, this is Captain Anise Coat here, IDC staff and specialty instructor qualified with PADI. Today we're going to talk briefly about dive planning and our experience diving in Yanbu at the SS Iona. So around six of us decided to go and dive in Iona back in June, and we came up with a plan. This is a picture I could find on the internet for Iona maybe in its better days. I guess it's authentic because the shape of the ship, it's very much like this actually. Of course, it's submerged now, submerged over 40 feet, but it's still, you can see the funnel and you can see the other parts of the ship too. So SS Iona, it's initially a British ship. It was with the British since 1918 approximately. There are some records with Lloyd's Bank which talk about this. And then the ship was taken over by Nazis around the First World War time. Then, because Nazi Germany had good ties with the Turks, they traded it with the Turks. The Turkish Ottomans took it, and then they used it as a cargo ship to deliver goods and deliver people to the Arabian Peninsula. Yanbu was a seaport at that time, so it's probably been buried since around the 1930s or even earlier than that. But ultimately, it is around 40 feet deep in Yanbu. So, of course, when you're diving at depth, you have to be prepared. I mean, preparation is a good part of the actual dive itself. Without preparation, you're only asking for trouble. So, what we decided to do, we realized that air consumption is going to be a challenge because it's quite a deep dive. The ship starts at around 40 feet and it goes down to around 140 feet. But of course, the recreational diving limits are around 120 feet, starting from 60 feet, so 18 meters. So we decided to do some dive planning. So what we decided to do was to make it a three-level multi-level dive, and the deepest to be around um, 30 meters, then coming up to 15 meters, then coming up to 10 meters. Okay, so we'll discuss this in meters now. So the deepest being 30 meters, then 15, then 10. And what we need to do, so dive planning, you can say, falls into two parts. One part is the depth. So this section here is multi-level dive planning, which you can do with your ERDP ML. This is only part of the journey though, because once you know how deep you want to go, you need to think about your air consumption. For your air consumption, which is the thing I want to discuss with you, you need to do a bit of thinking. You need to think how you're going to work out your air consumption. Okay. Now, this can be very easy because a lot of you will go diving every week. What you do when you're doing let's say, 45-minute dive at a depth of around 12 meters, which is not deep at all. So 12 meters is around 40 feet. And it's the lowest, it's basically what you do if you are a scuba diver or you have done a discovery, you come down to around 12 meters. So you monitor or you measure how much how many bars you use on a dive like this. So let's take a consumption of 150 bar for 45 minutes at 12 meters. So that means per meter at that depth, you calculate it will come to 3.33 bars. So you divide your consumption by the minutes. So then you get 3.33 bar at 12 meters. Now, because you're at 12 meters, that's 2.2 bar. So then what will that be at the surface? Well, you divide that 3.33 by 2.22 because you're going to use less air at the surface. So you're dividing this one by this. So that gives you 1.52 bars, which means if you're at the surface, you're using 1.52 bars per minute. Okay, so now you know how much air you use if you go on a kind of normal, shallow recreational dive. So that's one way of working out how much air you will use per minute on the surface. Now, once you know that, you then have to go back and calculate what it's going to be for each one of these levels. So level 3, level 2, level 1. Okay? You need to work out how much air you're going to use at these depths for this amount of time. So this one is the depth, this colored box here. This one is your actual bottom time, 50 minutes, 50 minutes, 10 minutes. Okay? And then this one is your NDL, which is no decompression limit. This one is your pressure group. So now you need to go and work out how much air you're going to use at each of these depths. So I've set up something here. So one way I can do this is I can just simply say for each one of these depths, okay, I would use 1.52 bar per minute on the surface. So I've done this already, so I'm going to put this into here. Okay, so 1.52, 1.52, 1.52. Because of course your surface consumption is the same. It's just a measure. But what this is doing, this is saying, okay, this is what you use at the surface. Now I'm going to calculate at that depth for that amount of time how much more you would use. So then I have a formula here which then says, okay, 30 meters is 4 bar, 15 meters is 2.5 bar, 10 meters is 2 bar. So then this is saying, okay, I'm going to multiply the surface consumption by the number of bar, which gives me 6.08, 3.8, 3.04. Then it's saying, okay, now I'm going to take this and multiply by the number of minutes. So then I get 91 consumption, 57 consumption, 30 consumption. So this is the number of bar, amount of bar we will use during our dive. Altogether, it comes to 179 bar. Okay. Now, if I start off with 210 bar, which is usual normal for recreational diving, then that means I will have 31 bar when I come to the surface, which is a little bit on the low side, but it gives me an idea that if I use less than this air, better for me. If I use this much air using this calculation, then I can manage. But maybe I should think about going with 2 tanks. So that's using 1.52 as a measure. Now, if I if I assume I have a colleague with me who uses more air than me, because remember, if you're going diving, you're going to go diving as a group, okay? You're not going to be by yourself, but you need your colleagues to be able to come back to the surface if they are running low of air. However, if you're running low of air, you don't want to have to be cutting your dive short. So if you put people together in a good buddy group, then you can let them take care of each other. Okay, so what's happening here in observed dive? In this scenario, it's a bit different to this one. This one I know, I go diving every week. I know what I'm like. This one, this scenario, suppose you go diving with somebody, you don't know how much air he uses usually, okay? But you go diving with them and you watch them, you go to 20 meters, which is about 60 feet, a bit more than 60 feet. It's slightly a deep dive. So what you do, you go with them, you should observe their bar consumption. So go with them, check the air, and then after another minute, check the air again. That will give you an idea how much bar they are using, okay? So, or you can either do this after 15 minutes to see how much air they used. So let's assume after 1 minute they used 5 bar. After 50 minutes, they would use 15 bar, which is something you can measure on their gauge. But okay, they are down at 20 meters. They're using 5 bar per minute. So there for 20 meters, your depth is 20 meters. That means it's 3 bar depth. Therefore, if you divide one by the other, it gives you the consumption of air at the surface. So this person would use more air at the surface than you would use. You see here? So I would use 152, 1.52. They would use 1.67. So now we know this guy is going to go diving with you. This is their surface consumption. Now we can do the calculations again, this time using their measure. So now I say, okay, I'm going to go down to 30 meters for the first level. Okay. That translates as 4 bar in terms of depth. And I'm going to be there 15 minutes. Same calculation again. It gives me 100 bar consumption at level number 1. Okay. So that guy's going to use 100 bar over here. Whereas I was going to use what? Let's put it back in again. I was going to use 91 bar. At level two, doing the same calculation, they're going to use 62 bar, 62 and a half. But I would, if I was going, I would use how much? 1.52 in here, 57 bar. So I would use less than them. They would use, at this, with the same equation, they would use 33.33 bar at 10 meters. If I was going, I would use how much? I would use 30 bar. So now compare theirs to mine. I had more air coming back than they would have. They will have 14 bar coming back to the surface, so it's quite low. So it's very important to be able to understand and calculate how much your air consumption will be. This is something we did before we went to Yanbu. And I realized that some of my colleagues or dive companions would use more air than me on a recreational dive because I had taken them to La Plage for a couple of weeks before we went to Yanbu. Therefore, I knew that they are likely to have very little air left at the end of the dive. So I advise them if your air is low, you need to surface. And because Yanbu, the Iona site is very well managed, a lot of ropes there, they were easily able to come back up. Whereas I stayed down a bit longer with another dive colleague of mine. So I hope that's helped and given you an idea how you can calculate the air consumption for any dive. My best advice is to incorporate this into any dive activity that you do. Make sure that you think about air consumption properly and have a think about doing side mounts or going with a double uh, two air tanks at the same time so that you don't end up running out of air very, very quickly. So if you want to know more information, do get in touch with me, like and subscribe to my videos. I hope you like them. Hope they help you and have yourself a great dive this weekend and take care. Bye bye for now.